world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
As the clock strikes 13, it's Thursday, the 13th of August, year of our Lord 2026. Well, we're seeing what I think is kind of a pincer movement if you look at politics from a pulled back perspective. We see the Zionist in complete control of the GOP. I call it the ZOP now, Zionist owned party. And at the bottom, we've got the rise of the, I guess we'd call them Islamic Marxists. Now, these are people who are full-on communist and also Islamic. And I have to look at this and say, is this yet another created boogeyman? Is this what we saw with the U.S. creating the Mujahideen, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Al-Nusra, putting them in charge in Syria and so forth? And we saw the same thing in Israel, didn't we? We saw that Benjamin Netanyahu helped to get Hamas into power in Gaza, giving them money. They want to have a boogeyman. Not to say these people are not bad, not to say they're not real boogeymen, but we see this happening just as certainly as we see the Great Replacement. It is a pincer movement of a mass migration of people to the bottom, trying to institute Sharia law, and at the top, maybe we got Noahide law coming from the Zionists. We'll be right back. Well, I want to begin with the news. Of course, we have the story yesterday, as amazing as it was, I guess it's not really anything new. We've seen Democrats and Republicans, in the name of national security and continuity of government, they constantly have a plan to create wars and conflicts that may come to Americans. And they always have a plan, don't they? A plan to save themselves and let the rest of us die. This goes back to the beginning of the Cold War. And in a microcosm, this is basically what Trump did. He used the people who were traveling with him, his White House staff and reporters, as decoys, while the Selective Service came in and said, lower those window shades on the airplane. So they couldn't see him sneaking out and getting into a catering truck and going to another plane, along with Hegseth, and it turns out a few other people. Who were the people that Trump thought were not expendable on this? It's not just the reporters and many of the White House staff that he left there as decoys to be attacked when they thought it was an incredible attack, but it's also some cabinet members. Yeah, little Marco Rubio didn't make the cut. How about that? He takes Hegseth with him, and he takes his, what should we call her? His girlfriend, I guess. Her official title is executive assistant. This is Natalie Harp, who has an infatuation with Trump, according to her brother, and according to what I can publicly see between the two of them. I guess she is the executive girlfriend right now. But he took White House Deputy Chief of Staff Dan Scavino. He took Natalie Harp, his executive girlfriend, and he took the director of the Oval Office. He left the rest of them to die. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, many other cabinet members who had traveled with him to the NATO meeting in Turkey. Trump later bizarrely said the military plane that he took instead was actually a greater risk. Yeah, I guess he almost could have died in that catering truck, right? One journalist predicted the entire escapade would ultimately become a propaganda win for Iran. Yeah, absolutely. What looks weaker than that? It'll embolden Iran that this caused the president to have to get into some sort of food cart to go to another plane. Exactly. And as a matter of fact, if that isn't enough of an issue with Trump, just I'll play this for you. This is a few days old here. This is Todd Blanche, who I'll just remind you has now become the Attorney General of the Department of Justice, the department that is obstructing justice, especially when it comes to Epstein.
Thank you. You said this is the end of the Epstein, of your review of the Epstein files. So just to clarify, is the public going to learn the identities of the men who abused the girls with the information that you're releasing? And if not, why not? And then I have a quick follow-up.
I mean, you just baked in an assumption into your question that I have never said and I don't know to be true. Is the public going to learn about men that abuse these girls? Like,
what are we talking about?
I don't understand what that means.
I've never heard of this before.
Well, I mean, they're the men who abused the young women through Epstein's.
Look, we said in July, and it remains as
what a liar.
It was in July. If we had information, we meaning the Department of Justice, about men who abused women, we would prosecute them, right? We talk about the work that we're doing. That's why I said that. I said this.
You're so honest.
There's this built-in assumption that somehow there's this hidden tranche of information of men that we know about that we're covering up or that we're choosing not to prosecute. That is not the case. I don't know whether there are men out there that abuse these women.
Yeah, we don't know about that. Just like the Republican Senator Kennedy from Louisiana said. So you got all these people who are victims, but you don't have any perpetrators, right? That's the strangest thing, isn't it? Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. Where's Martin Short when we need him? We used to do the sweating, nervous guy being interrogated by 60 Minutes. Unfortunately, Todd Blanche is such an accomplished liar that he doesn't even sweat when he talks about when it comes out of his mouth. It's just amazing. So no Fourth Amendment in American airports. This is an article from Technocracy News, and it really comes from American thinker M. Walter, who wrote it. And it's an interesting case that just happened. We had a guy who was arrested for obstruction of an investigation. What did he do? Well, he had a phone, and you can get these apps on Graphene OS that you can put on a Google phone, and you can set up a passcode so that if you want to, you can enter the particular passcode, and it will erase everything on your phone. And so the Border Patrol agents insisted that he give them his phone at the border. And so he said, okay, here you go. And what's the password? Okay, well, here's a password. He gives it to them. They put it in, and the phone is erased. They were very angry about that. So they arrested him and charged him with obstructing justice. And so the headline is No Fourth Amendment in American Airports. That's right. And, we had Scalia, the guy who was supposed to be the strict constructionist for the Constitution. He was perfectly fine with that. Perfectly fine with anything the TSA does to you. But now this is metastasizing because understand these are Border Patrol agents. They don't just operate at airports. They have said that, and this goes back to the mid-20th century, that they have jurisdiction within a 100-mile distance from the border. So that's about 2/3 of Americans in that area here. It isn't just airports. It's about all ports of entry and checkpoints set by the Border Patrol within 100 miles of a border. If you refuse to hand over your phone, you could be charged on the spot because your digital life isn't in your suitcase, but it is in your phone. And again, when we go back and we look at the Fourth Amendment, the idea that you get a warrant, what did it say? So that you could have, you could be protecting your person and your property. And that really is the personal aspect of this. They didn't have cell phones, obviously. But if they had seen what this was set up with this technology, it would have certainly applied to cell phones. You see, the Fourth Amendment is not about a procedure of warrants. The warrants are there as a tool to protect your privacy. The Fourth Amendment is really about your right to privacy and your right to be left alone. That's what it's really about. And so he gave it to him and then erased it. So do you as an American citizen have to hand over your cell phone upon a warrantless demand by a border agent at the airport? This case that's going through the courts right now is about one man. His name is Tunnick. He refused. Not only did he refuse, but he had an app on his phone that triggered its erasure once you keyed in a particular code to open it. His phone was indeed erased right there on the spot in the hands of the Border Patrol agent, and it really got them angry, to say the least. So they charged him. The man was not a criminal. He's not under suspicion, under surveillance for anything, as far as we know. He was in point of fact, a left-wing activist with environmental interests, but again, without any contact with or prior interest from law enforcement that we know of. He's just a guy coming home from a trip to the Dominican Republic. And you might be thinking, well, a left-wing activist, that sounds suspicious. Well, he said in this article, a right-winger I know just traveled internationally recently, and she traveled with a burner phone to avoid exactly this kind of search in another country. The country she was going to was England, that has a two-tier justice system now, right? And thought police. In England, there is no Fourth Amendment. They can search your phone when you land. They also have no First Amendment. And they have terrible censorship laws. You can be arrested, jailed for social media posts, even for some perfectly benign ones like Islam is incompatible with liberty. But that kind of thing. He said the Dominican Republic is in the same situation almost. They have no Fourth Amendment. They have no First Amendment. They can do whatever they want to with your phone. So maybe this guy just didn't want the hassle. But look, we don't have to justify why we want privacy. And privacy isn't something that should just belong to people that you agree with politically, just like free speech. The Supreme Court has never ruled on your Fourth Amendment rights as they specifically relate to your phone. They have when it comes to the searches by TSA, and I think they got it 100% wrong. I am an absolutist when it comes to the Constitution and government, and this is absolutely wrong in my opinion, just like the infringements on free speech. We've got people who are looking at the hateful, very hateful speech coming from Hassan Piker. I've seen a lot of conservatives saying, well, this is it. This is over the line. We should, I think he should be canceled in the universities and so forth. And we need to investigate and shut these people down. Well, I don't agree with his speech, obviously. I'm not a communist at all. However, we need to understand that freedom doesn't need to be defended. The truth needs to be let loose like a lion, right? And if we can't defend the truth, that's on us. But we don't want to create a government that has the right to censor everybody, that has a legal ability to do that. We never want that. That's why I'm an absolutist on the First Amendment and on the Fourth Amendment and on the Second Amendment, the Third, the Fifth, the Sixth, you name it. So the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and personal effects, right? Against unreasonable searches and seizures. It is there to protect your privacy. The Supreme Court has ruled on the Fourth Amendment exceptions at the border, but not on cell phones in particular. I mean, this ruling about cell phones was quite about the border, and the TSA agents was quite some time before we had all of our lives on our cell phones. But your phone ought to be a separate matter entirely. It contains all of your digital papers and effects. Just because the people who wrote the Constitution were using paper and not a word processor doesn't mean that we don't have those same principles. It's the freedoms, it's the principles that matter. There was no probable cause to search his phone. They weren't looking for anything specific, which is what a warrant would demand. They just wanted to go on a scenic drive, seeing what they could see on his phone. And this is why you don't let CPS or anybody who shows up knocking you, I'd like to just come in and talk to him from the government. No, get a warrant. Don't even let them look in the house. If they look in the house and they can say, well, I forced my way in because I saw something in the house that I thought was suspicious. It doesn't have to be true. It's just a catchphrase that they can use. The Washington Post just published an op-ed piece. It was entitled, it's by the attorney that is defending this guy. And it was spot on. Listen to this. Your privacy rights don't disappear at the border. Congress or the courts need to make it clear that a smartphone is not a suitcase. And when we talk about the border, as I mentioned before, they have interpreted the border as 100 miles within the border, not just at the border, but 100 miles inland from that. Think about that. And I looked at that and I thought, when did that happen? I was surprised to see that's been around for quite some time. It actually goes back to 1953. The Border Patrol was created in 1924. How do we survive for a couple hundred years without Border Patrol? Well, I don't know. You got to ask yourself that about all these different things. But by the time they got to 1953, they had just had the 1952 Immigration and Nationality Act. And then the next year, what they did was the Department of Justice, that department that we have stellar people like Todd Blanche in charge of, or before him, Pam Bondi. Yeah, that kind of thing. It is a bureaucratic thing. There was no vote. This is not a law. This is not something that Congress put through. It was a regulation. It was a rule that was passed by the bureaucracy under the DOJ. There was no debate. There was no public comment. They just said, well, Border Patrol is going to have jurisdiction within the first 100 miles of the border. And just like that, it happened. So when that was done in 1953, there were 1,100 agents for Border Patrol. Today, there are 21,000. Think about that. And the 100-mile grab that they did puts 2/3 of the U.S. population inside the quote-unquote border. 230 million people live within that. And so the Border Patrol, and specifically the Department of so-called Justice, have usurped authority to conduct warrantless searches of vehicles, to operate checkpoints within that 100-mile border. They have also given themselves permission to trespass on private property within 100 miles of that border, within 25 miles of the border, I should say. But they still acknowledge that within 25 miles of the border, they need to get a warrant to enter a house. How about that? To enter a house. That's the only thing they say they need a warrant for. Isn't that amazing? This is how government metastasizes like a cancer. As I've said over and over again, the fact that Congress, and this has been going on for a very long time, this is the 1950s, Congress has increasingly abdicated its authority to pass laws. They create bureaucracies. They hand massive amounts of power over to these bureaucracies. And just as Nancy Pelosi said, we got to pass Obamacare to find out what's in it. We're going to create this thing, say we're going to have national health insurance of some sort. So you work out all the details. We can't get that done. We're too busy holding show trials and hearings and putting ourselves on TV and getting paid by our donors. We can't be bothered with that. So you do that. And then when they do it as a rule or regulation, and there's no public discussion, there's no vote, there's no debate, and there is no due process with any of this either. When they've got a rule, they say, well, if it was the law, then the Bill of Rights would apply. But since this is a rule from the bureaucracy and not a law, well, then you don't have any constitutional protections. Isn't that an amazing lie? It's coming from government. I don't care if it's passed by these do-nothing people in Congress or if it's coming from the aggressive bureaucracy constantly seeking to expand its power. Obstruction means that I'm obstructing some type of an investigation, like Todd Blanche. And without any type of warrant or even a reasonable suspicion of criminal activity, what investigation am I obstructing? Said the lawyer in his op-ed piece. He said, we need to make a determination that a smartphone is not the same thing as a suitcase. And so he said, if there is no investigation, no crime is being looked at, what really is being investigated here? Well, you are being investigated. This is the hallmark of tyranny, of Stalinism. Remember, Stalin said, bring me the man, I'll find the crime. Well, that's what this is. You are the one who is being investigated. Bring me the man, and I'll find the crime. Bring me the phone of the man, and I'll find a crime. One hopes that Mr. Tunnick isn't subjected to a crushing ordeal here, but one does hope this case makes it to the Supreme Court so we can settle this once and for all. Yeah, let's let the Supreme Court tell us what the Constitution actually says. I don't need them to interpret something that's written in English. If it's in a foreign language, they could interpret it. It's pretty clear what this is. The Constitution is already settled regardless of what the Supreme Court says one way or the other. And they have gotten it wrong so many times on so many different issues. It's one thing to paw through my underwear looking for explosives. I think we can all appreciate the safety concern in that. Yeah, but, let's also understand, I disagree with this article here. This is one of the most heartbreaking, underreported stories I was ever involved in. And that was what we found out in the case where an individual was suing the TSA for doing the searching, the pause on you. and the naked body scanners and stuff. He was a guy who was an engineer, and he sued him over that. And as part of that lawsuit, of course, you get discovery. And he was able to discover some documents. He couldn't talk about them. They put it on a gag order, right? But fortunately, what they did when they posted the lawsuit documents on the government website where they put all the different lawsuits, Pincer.gov, they accidentally put up the unredacted documents. And he called us at InfoWars and he said, hey, this is up, take a look at this. And we grabbed it. And then later that day, they realized their mistake. And they took that down and they put up the redacted one. Now, what was it they didn't want you to see? Because that was wonderful to see first the redactions and then the other ones. You can see exactly the key issues that they don't want you to know. The key issue was that they said, there is no current threat. This is in 2011. There is no current threat to airports or airplanes. No threat. And yet there was a threat from TSA. There was a threat from TSA to the state of Texas because you had an honest constitutional representative there, David Simpson, in the state legislature. I interviewed him several times. And he was the one who said, you're not going to do this, especially to kids. And it was unanimously passed in the House in Texas. Then it went to the Senate, and it got blocked by a guy, his name was Dewhurst. He was lieutenant governor at the time. And he organized the Senate, as president of the Senate or whatever their official title is as the lieutenant governor. He was able to organize opposition in the Senate and shut it down. What was his background? He had had a career with the CIA. When he got out, they set him up in the oil business. He made so much money that he bought his way into that office, spending more money than anybody had ever spent in any election in Texas up to that point. And it paid off. It paid off for these people. They shut it down. And yet, that was happening in 2011. The federal government said, if you don't allow TSA to put our hands on you and your children, then we're going to make Texas a no-fly zone. You're not going to be able to fly in or out. Same game they were playing with the vaccines a few years later, right? You don't get vaccinated, we're going to shut down all flights in and out of your country. And this is why you had countries in South America desperate to get the Pfizer vaccine, and Pfizer started blackmailing them and said, you're going to hold us harmless on anything that we do, not just on the fact that we rushed this vaccine out, but even if we do something fraudulent, or even if we have negligent manufacturing, you will not sue us. And we want you to back this up with assets outside of your country, military assets, embassies, things like that. And it was a pharmaceutical trade publication, Stat News, that reported that. So we've seen this type of blackmail done before, but they were threatening to shut down Texas. At the same time, internally, the TSA said there are no threats to airports or airplanes. Don't allow them to take your liberty and your God-given rights away with some kind of a phony threat. This is why I'm an absolutist on all this stuff. I've seen this over and over again. As I said, it breaks my heart when I see stories like this, and we shout as much as we could, tried to get it out. Even at InfoWars, we couldn't get any traction with it. Why was that? Well, for two reasons. Number one, it was InfoWars, and Alex had played the game so much of making the truth unbelievable and he liked to do that. That was something that got him a big audience. Even people who didn't believe him would watch him for the entertainment value. So there was that, number one. And number two, of course, the mainstream media doesn't want to push back against the police surveillance state. So we couldn't get any traction at all with that. I've mentioned it many, many times, but to no avail, really. So ICE has now got a new plan.
I just want to say real fast about TSA. On its face, it is obviously absurd. Have you ever seen a TSA agent that looks like they're qualified to handle a terrorist? Have you ever seen any single one of them that doesn't look like they wouldn't run away at the first sign of trouble? Even
more so, if you got a terrorist who's going to bomb something, where's the ideal place to bomb? It's where you got everybody bunched up in a line. And we have seen that very thing happen in some Muslim countries where they went to attack the Christians. Rather than trying to get in the church and blow it up, what they did was they took their suicide bombers and used them against the people who were queued up to go through security to get into the church. So it had exactly the same type of thing, the old TSA type of security. I absolutely hate that. I hate being a criminal suspect and having to be shaken down. It just underscores to me that I live in a prison. That's what they do in a prison. And I criticized that when they were doing it in schools. I said that this is prison training for the kids to have to go through metal detectors and have cops in schools. We never had any of that stuff when I was in school. And we went to Orlando. I guess it's probably about 12 years ago now. We had some business that we had to do in Florida, personal family business, and we took a little bit of a vacation, Karen and I. So we went to Orlando, and we weren't really interested in going to the parks. They're very expensive. We'd been there a number of times anyway. And so I said, let's just go get something to eat at the outdoor court that's in Universal Studios. And they had this TSA security thing that was set up like 12 years ago. I said, that's it. We're leaving. I'm not going to go through that. I don't have to do that. I don't fly. I'm sick of this stuff. I do not want to be reminded that I live in a prison plantation. I'm sick of this. I don't want to live this way. And here's another example of what they're doing with this. This is ICE, our sadistic overseers on the plantation. ICE has got a new plan to outfit agents with electrocution torture gloves. This would be funny if it wasn't so horrific. Actually, it's just so over the top. It is, I think, kind of funny. It's so over the top. The rogue agency with an $80 billion, that's billion with a B, slush fund that allows them to concoct and to fund new ways to visit cruelty upon our communities. That's the subtitle from Futurism, and they're exactly right. So they're planning to spend up to $20 million to purchase thousands of conductive distraction. This is what they call the electrified gloves. Conductive distraction and de-escalation devices. Yeah, this is, folks, the military-industrial complex and all this Pentagon talk has now come to the police departments. They have now turned internal. That is what the war on terror has led us to, and this fear about immigration. Again, all of this stuff are problems that were created by the federal government itself. We're not saying they're not real problems, but the federal government created them. And they don't want to have any nonviolent solutions. They don't want to have any solutions. It's just like the pandemic. You know, you could have something that's not a dangerous, expensive drug as a solution if somebody's got a respiratory illness, but they won't have that. No. You're going to have what I'd always planned to put in always. This is just the MacGuffin to put you in there. So the devices are called gloves, amazingly enough. But, and again, like we're talking about the Pentagon or this industrial complex of force, that stands for Generated Low Output Voltage Emitters. Glove. The manufacturer...
Not everything needs to be an acronym, guys.
That's right. Well, it is if you're in the military-industrial complex, the police-state-industrial complex. The company is called Compliant Technologies. How about that? Got to have a compliant population. So they act like normal gloves until they're activated with a switch. They need to make direct contact with someone's skin. So you're going to need to wear your coats. The painful shock they administer can help an ICE agent, quote, gain compliance within seconds. It's immediate and it's sharp, said the person who has created this. And he said, I call it like a bee sting. That'd be great. Just constant bee stinging on your skin.
Can we actually outfit ICE with trained hornets or something that they could just sick on them? You know, why not just go all the way? If this is like a bee sting, why not just give them trained killer bees?
Yeah, well, I have an allergy to tyranny, actually. But anyway, this is your sadistic government overseers on the plantation want to be able to put their hands on you like, and it feels like a bee is stinging you. We're going to take a quick break, folks, and we'll be right back to finish what this is really about, how they're going to use it, and the other things that they have developed here. We'll be right back.
decoding the mainstream propaganda. It's the David Knight Show.
Well, we're just talking about these new gloves, these generated low output voltage emitters. It feels like you're being stung by a bee when they grab you with these things. It's electric charge. I spent the last year showing this country they're too quick to use force. Now they'll be able to deploy electric shocks with a slight push of a button that makes maybe nobody else can see them do it. And that is the key issue. You know, if they shoot somebody with a taser, they shoot somebody with a gun, or they beat somebody with a stick, people have video that shows them doing that. With this, they can do this in a surreptitious way. They're planning to spend up to $20 million on these things. So that's your money at work, your tax money at work. Introducing gloves that can so easily be used to deliver terrible pain in encounters is a recipe for harm to the public. And as I said before, we live in a prison society, and there was a case 4 years ago, 2022. You had two correction officers at the Lawrence County Detention Center in South Carolina. They were arrested and charged with brutalizing an inmate because they were using these very gloves to repeatedly stun them. So you got somebody who just grabs you and hangs on to it. I mean, they could do it. You can wear a coat, but they could do this to your face or to your neck or something, anything that's exposed to your hand. And so they were doing this to prisoners to torture them. Folks, we're living in a prison society here. This is the overseers on the plantation. Compliance Technology warns that the capital G gloves, the GLOVs, should not be used as punishment against people merely exhibiting verbal defiance or belligerence, which is what they've used force on people for, or on children, pregnant women, or elderly, or disabled people. And of course, we have seen them do that, use force on all those categories of people. It knows fully well the kind of customer that it's getting in bed with. ICE agents have repeatedly put children in harm's way. They've beaten teenagers. They've used force to capture pregnant women. And they have body slammed elderly citizens, which is to say nothing of the people that they've shot and killed. These are the people who are now going to get electric gloves, courtesy of you, the taxpayer. They have a very high potential for abuse. And Time magazine says, when we look at the Trump administration and the scrutiny that they've seen because of the widespread use of force in its immigration crackdown, which has seen at least 10 people die. And here's why I say, there are ways to address this government-created problem. We all understand the government has created this, and we all understand that, folks, it's not just Biden, it's not just Obama. This is something that has happened through multiple administrations. We've had many times where Republicans said, yeah, we got an immigration problem. Back in the Reagan administration, for example, we're going to offer people amnesty, but then we're going to control the borders. They never did. They got the amnesty. They offered them citizenship. And guess what? Most of the people didn't even want the citizenship. They were coming here perhaps for just a work permit or something. But we can't stop non-citizens from getting, from using the welfare state. Why is that? They just don't have the will to do it, not even Republicans? You would think the Republicans, who generally don't like the welfare state, would catch on to this Cloward and Piven strategy. And of course, that was a couple of Democrat strategists who said, we can bring the economy, they were socialists, they said, we can bring the economy down with welfare. Problem is, the American citizens are not getting on it in sufficient numbers. So let's bring in foreign immigrants. They'll get on it. Yeah, Somalis, about 54% of them are on welfare. But we'll bring in some immigrants, and that way we can collapse the society. It was something you would expect the Republicans to do, but they never did. But now we've got the answer. After they create this festering problem, and it gets big enough, now they use it as a MacGuffin to bring in a tyrannical police force. A DHS spokesperson tells Time that 70% of the people that ICE arrests are, quote, dangerous illegal aliens charged or convicted of a crime. And yet, when you look at their own information, their own statistics, show that they are lying. This is a lie that is routinely told by the Trump regime, and it is not true. Data has shown that the majority of those who are held in ICE custody during Trump's second term have no criminal convictions on their records. Many times they pick up the wrong people. Many times, they're elderly people, the abuse. I'm thinking of that one guy who was he was a Hung immigrant and from I think it's Cambodia or something, Vietnam or Cambodia, going back to the Vietnam War. He'd been here for decades. Had been a working member of society. He'd had no crimes. They'd come in and drag him out of his home just wearing shorts. On the way out, he got the blanket from his young son that was there and put that around and take him through the snow and road trip him around until they find out, oh, wait a minute, this guy's got permission to be here. Then they just drop him off with no apology. We've lost sight of the mission of ICE. And, you know, folks, this is another tactic that's being done, quite frankly. There's a couple of things that are negative that are going to come out of this. Number one, the abuse that's actually done to people. That's a horrible thing. But it is setting people up. It's got Republicans and MAGA people are cheering this over-the-top stuff because they see this problem and because they have been trained to just categorically hate all immigrants. And so this is that's one aspect of it. You know, this groupthink that says, yeah, it's great. I don't care if the government just goes off the rails. And then the other aspect of this is that it actually makes immigration enforcement look bad, right? So people say, well, I don't want any. A lot of people are going to react to it and say, I don't want any immigration enforcement. We see that coming from the Democrats. There is a happy medium, as I said for a long time. Stop incentivizing people to come here. Stop giving them welfare when they come here. Even if somebody is going to voluntarily immigrate here and wants to be an American citizen, fine. Part of the deal is that you're going to come here and you're going to support yourself by working. And you're not going to be on the welfare state. Not until at least the second generation. That'd be one way to take this out. But they're not going to do something simple like that. They want to have an excuse for conflict. They want to have an excuse to grow the government. The gloves are only about pain compliance. They don't incapacitate, they only hurt. Pain compliance is a method of domination. And because of that, it's very subject to being misused. It is used in circumstances where it is not needed. And again, you got people arrested and jailed for using that on prisoners. But on the outside, we're all prisoners, aren't we? To some degree or the other. The CEO of Compliant Technologies described the device as low optic. That's their Pentagonese for meaning that people can't see it very well. It's low optic, which means that it can't be, they don't want anybody taking a video of what they're doing here. ICE is trying to avoid public accountability, and that's what this device does for them. Well, when we look at what is happening with the other aspect of this police state, the intelligence aspect of it, the data centers, and again, we've seen over and over again that now even Republican governors are out there saying, well, we'll allow these data centers in as long as you assure us that you're going to pay for your own power. You're going to generate your own power. As Matt Trujillo pointed out, and I played a sermon that he gave about that, and he said, just understand these things are not data centers, number one, they're surveillance centers. And all of these things that are really bad that are happening with them, the noise, the burden on the electric grid, the water system, all these different things, those can all be managed. But the bottom line is how the government is going to use it for surveillance. And that is still going to be there. If your objections are only to these visceral things that are in your face, let's say, and then ultimately you're still going to be vulnerable to a police state. So this is a Democrat senator in Tennessee out of Nashville. And of course, Nashville has had their roundabout with a data center that was put adjacent to the Nashville Zoo. And it got the animals freaked out. And when I played the statements for you from the Republican candidates for governor, they were both saying, well, yeah, I understand the city. We don't want to have something happening like what happened in Nashville. That really drove the point home, even for the Republicans, to say we don't want to do something like that. We don't want to burden the poor zoo animals. Now, you, on the other hand, if you got a home that has been in your family for decades, we don't have a problem driving you out of that home with a 24/7 noise and lights and all the rest of the stuff that are going to be there. We don't care about you. It's just the zoo animals. But this was right there. She was right there at that. So she put out a bill. She called it Power to the People Act, which would allow local governments to authorize or deny new data centers in their jurisdiction. So I was a little bit surprised about that because I thought, well, this really is, and she admits it. She said, this is really a local issue. And it is. But, and I imagine that with Blackburn in as governor, she'll be pushing these things from the state level. And we know that Trump has pushed this, and she's helped him to push it from the federal level. And what are they doing? Well, of course, the usual game. Throw money at it, subsidize it, bribe people, and then get them used to this money and then blackmail them by saying, we're going to take other money away from you. Well, I think that is a part of it. But the reality is that that was part of the One Big Beautiful Bill. Remember that? A 10-year moratorium against any state or local regulation of AI. Now, how is that not a complete denial of the 10th Amendment? It is. That's clearly an unconstitutional law. That passed through the House. It has not passed through the Senate yet, but they still that's where they want to go. And so perhaps that is what she's doing in terms of trying to push back against that. If you could find some honest people in the local government or the town council, they could take that to the Supreme Court. I think that is clearly a violation of the 10th Amendment. Who knows? Maybe it would be so obvious that even the Supreme Court would agree with that. We could always hope. Anyway, she said her goal is to fortify and to create protections around municipalities being able to regulate and to refuse data centers. Again, as Trump and Blackburn are trying to push that on us. Already there's been several counties that have put moratoria on data centers. There have been 6 of those in Tennessee. 2 counties, in addition to that, have outright banned them. So that's 8 counties. I don't know how many counties are in Tennessee. I should know since I live here, but I don't. Anyway, the one of those bans is only until December the 1st of this year. The Metro Nashville Council signed off on using eminent domain in the zoo case to seize private property. So they put it in an industrial park that was adjacent to the zoo, and they didn't like the fact that it bothered the zoo animals. So what they did was they went out and stole land from individuals because they're going to put something probably put it in a residential area. They don't care about humans. Last month, Governor Bill Lee and 23 other Republican governors signed off on Trump's pledge to ensure that AI companies, rather than ratepayers, pay for data centers. Well, again, that is, like Matt Trujillo said, when you have your objection is about electricity rates or whatever, they can fix that problem. But the real problem, the underlying thing remains, and that is the surveillance. I mean, if they're going to use these things for anything other than surveillance and AI, then it becomes, we have these other visceral issues that people can adjust. There's still trespasses against individuals when there's noise pollution, things like that. Protests against data centers, by the way, are now threatening $130 billion worth of big tech investments. And so it's kind of interesting to see that the people who have been leading this, just like this Tennessee representative, have consistently been Democrats. As I was talking about the Republican candidates for governor, you had the Senator Marsha Blackburn on the Republican side and Congressman Rose on the Republican side, and both of them were pushing the Trump perspective that, these things are wonderful. They're going to solve all of our problems. We got to have them. No obstacles to them whatsoever. We got to catch China, And then you had Monty Fritz, who was running, and he had all the right issues on this. He was right on the issue, but he wouldn't put out a statement. And he actually did pretty well, surprisingly. He got in the mid-20s in terms of percentage of the vote, and he had been polling in single digits. Everybody had kind of written him off, but he was right on the issues. Unfortunately, didn't have the money or the time to get these things out, I guess. But on the Democrat side, as I pointed out, the Democrats were spot on this particular issue. I mean, they're horrific on all these other economic issues, on the social issues and everything else. They're just abhorrent. But on the data centers, they got it exactly right. And you got the most radical leftists out there. AOC, Bernie Sanders, Rashida Tlaib, these are the people who are out there trying to ban these data centers. And I agree with what they're doing. Part of the reason for that, I think, is because the Democrats, from their socialist communist perspective, are knee-jerk in their opposition to corporations. in the same way that the GOP is knee-jerk in its obeisance to these corporations and partnering with them. I think that is fundamentally what is there, and I think it's a very dangerous thing because there is so much opposition, bipartisan, against these things for many reasons. I think it's foolish for the Republicans to side with the corporations, except they want the money, right? I guess they figure they don't care what the general public thinks as long as they can get the money of these donors. I guess that's the calculation. But it is pushing us towards a socialist, communist situation. So, which way are we going to go towards total tyranny and total concentration of power? Will we go the Democrats towards socialism and communism, or will we go with the Republicans towards this kind of techno-fascism? That, unfortunately, is the choice, quote unquote, that we're being offered here. It is a Hobson's choice, isn't it? Seemingly an infinite drive for computing power, and against the backdrop of an industry measured in trillions of dollars, a few scattered protests in City Hall may seem to be inconsequential. Yet, as more and more local campaigns arise in opposition to the data centers, the collective financial implications are becoming impossible to ignore. There are now hundreds of billions of dollars exposed to a growing risk of local opposition. In the first 3 months of 2026 alone, at least 75 separate data center projects have faced some kind of organized opposition at the local level. Those 75 developments represent a combined $130 billion worth of investments. But, as Futurism points out, despite this growing opposition, you see what is happening is the investors and the hedge funds are just looking at this and saying, okay, we'll just have to factor that into the cost of doing business. In the same way that opposition to other types of development that were halted because of a snail darter, right? They figure in the environmental cost for all this stuff to comply with it. They're just figuring that in, and with the astronomical, incomprehensible amount of money that they have, they just move on. And I think that's exactly what is happening with the Republican Party. They're not looking at the issues that people want, and they're not looking at the national issue. Locally, you're going to be affected, of course, by these obvious things. Electricity prices, you're going to be affected by the noise and other things like that. But everybody in America is affected by the surveillance aspect of it. Then we get to Flock, the eyes of this beast that is being created, this government beast, and the mark that they want to put on it from it. That's the digital ID that Marsha Blackburn is pushing so hard. Flock was caught training cops on how to own the narrative, but they're being owned and ratioed on social media because their playbook has been exposed. But you don't even need to have the playbook. People could see through the propaganda right away. A good example of this is in Coral Springs, Florida. The Coral Springs Police Department decided to get ahead of resident anger over the Flock safety license plate cameras. It posted a friendly myth versus fact list. It assured everybody that the cameras don't track them personally and that access is tightly controlled. It drew more than 24,700 comments, virtually every single one of them negative. So you get this small police department, and they get 25,000 negative comments, none of them grateful. Residents asking where the department had let the vendor write its homework. Well, yes, as a matter of fact, they did. And pointing out the obvious irony that the only people qualified to promise that you aren't being tracked are the ones who are doing the tracking. Facebook itself eventually slapped a community note on the department's post, informing readers that it hadn't actually addressed their concerns. And the department had to hold a live public Q&A just to make the story go away. But now, the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would say. Still, the unelected police chief, and this is the difference between sheriffs and police, right? The unelected police chief, they decide to go ahead with this stuff anyway. They don't care what you think. It's just like when they changed the borders of America. And stop and think about that. The U.S. government maintains that it's our territory 200 miles into the ocean from our borders, and also then 100 miles in the other direction, a jurisdiction for Border Patrol. And yet the Trump administration is freaking out because you've got at the Strait of Hormuz between Iran and Oman, they've got a 21-mile border. Well, how dare you say that that is under your control? The hypocrisy is off the charts. Well, Flock isn't just selling surveillance, it is scripting the public case for buying it. A private company is writing the government's talking points for a debate over whether the government should be allowed to watch you. That alone ought to tell you who this technology is really being built to serve. The recent wave of glossy community outreach content flooding police social media accounts across the country isn't some spontaneous PR instinct. It is a coordinated smokescreen designed to normalize a dragnet before residents notice that their own town signed up for one. And here's a good example of how that goes wrong. This is, I talked about this yesterday. I didn't show you the video. The video was very long. I had to edit it down, but I think you'll get the gist of it. This is a couple that is pulled over for driving a stolen car. And they are pulled out of their car. They are handcuffed. She got a 6-week-old baby in the car. And you'll see this when they're doing it, their body cam footage. You know, they got a gun drawn on the car. First, the driver gets on, like, come here. You know, he comes over there, they handcuff him. No explanation, really, for what's going on. Put him in the car. And then they've got the gun trained on the mother and the baby.
Hey, driver. Hey, put your hands up and walk back to me. Hey, how old are they? My daughter, my girlfriend, my son. Okay. The reason I'm stopping you is your plate's stolen. You said it's who? It's coming back stolen. Your license plate. You got your ID on your phone?
Yeah, I got my wallet.
Where's your wallet at?
My pocket.
Okay. Hey, well, just come on back here for me.
Just imagine that this is you. It could be you, right? He's done nothing wrong. Putting him in handcuffs, and they're going to put him in the car. There's the gun pointed at the car with a woman and baby, and that's their car, by the way. They didn't steal it.
This lighter?
Yeah, this is the lighter.
This is all happening because of Flock.
Hey, push your hands. All right, just go ahead and step out.
Pretty hilarious. One of those guys is Officer Lackey.
I know you got a small baby.
214, stand by. The car was showing up as stolen, so we're just confirming.
Oh shit! No, this is my car.
Yeah, it might be a mix-up in the system, so if it is, then y'all will be good to go.
Can you see that tag in front of you? APX55X. So APX55Y is the one stolen. So it's not yours. You flagged one of our cameras, and so that's why we stopped you, because we thought it was the other plate. So give me 1 second. I'll get you out of cuffs. Okay, Bob? Okay. So your car flagged on some of our modern technology.
So do I need to contact somebody about it? Or?
No,
okay.
Your plate is not stolen. It's one letter off.
Okay.
And the camera wrote.
Yep, that gave me a heart attack. Right?
Yeah, sorry about that.
I knew it was my business.
So it's the first 5 are correct. The last digit's the only one that's off.
Oh, okay. I got you.
Close enough for government work,
So
right?
that's the whole reason for the stop and all of that.
Okay. Lord, y'all gave me a heart attack. Woo.
Now they're getting the guy out. He's been handcuffed and in the car for a while.
Cool.
Those cameras, they're placed everywhere, and they hit license plates, and they'll flag. But I'm not going to say they're completely perfect.
Are we good?
Y'all are good.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry about that, guys. Have a good night.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, well, cool. That's great. Thanks for being cool about all this stuff. I mean, these people probably stopped for a half hour. Got multiple police cars there, sirens going off, lights are going off, guns drawn. You're handcuffed, you're put in the cars, and it's like, oh, well, never mind. It's just some of our modern technology. It's got some glitches in it sometimes. You're just fine. And of course, this is coming right on the tail of a woman who has had her car flagged multiple times. They shut down I-94 with multiple police cars surrounding her, guns drawn. And that was the second time in a week that happened to her. They said, well, that's human error. That's not Flock's fault at all. We just forgot to take her license plate out of the database on the hot list. And it was, in that particular case, it wasn't car theft. It was murder. They could have easily have shot her. And after the fact, after the second one, which got a lot of attention because of the snarling traffic jam that it created on I-94, south of Milwaukee, I think it is. But because of that, she got interviewed by the local press, and she's just shaking. She said, I'm afraid to even get in the car. My daughter won't ride in it anymore. Twice in a week she's had this type of thing. So again, city councils can be briefed privately. Contract votes can be timed ahead of organized opposition. Talking points can be handed out to officers before a single question is asked. But none of that stops the thousands of ordinary residents from typing into the same comment thread at the same time. We know what's going on, and we also know that they don't care what's going on, do they? And so the one thing's got to be controlled is they've got to restrict your use of the internet. They got to restrict your speech. They got to force you to get an ID. And that's the response from people like Marsha Blackburn and Donald Trump. Well, if you're going to complain about what we're doing, then you're going to have to get an ID so we can track you down more easily. And West Virginia, you have House Republicans have finally joined Democrats in opposing flock camera surveillance. This is a no-brainer, really, if there was honest government. But to me, I look at this, and this is proof positive that the GOP has completely sold out any and all integrity, any and all concern about protecting individual liberty and the rest of this. They have absolutely no interest in that as long as they can get the money. And that's how they get the money, is by selling us out. Whether it's to the big tech companies in Silicon Valley or whether it's to Israel, they sell us out. The State's Own Freedom Caucus is pushing to ban the cameras outright. And then you have the ACLU on the left pushing against it as well. So we got 4 safety bills, quote unquote, that are coming out of the Senate. Every single one of them is a path to digital ID. Every single one of them uses the MacGuffin of we got to protect the kids and keep them safe. You got Marsha Blackburn's Kids Online Safety Act. You have the Chatbot Act from Ted Cruz. What do we have in common with these people when you look at them? Again, there's Democrats involved in this as well. You got Ed Markey, Youth AI Privacy Act from Senator Ed Markey. My coverage of Ed Markey goes back to when he was a lying congressman. Now he's a lying senator. And when you look at the people that are involved in putting these things forward, people like Markey of the Democrats, Ted Cruz, Marsha Blackburn, these are people who are known liars and selling us out on one issue after the other. Going back to Markey, before I went to InfoWars, I was working with a group that was looking at the climate issue and how it was being used to push renewable mandates on people, how it was being used to ban cars, to even ban fireplaces and barbecue grills. And that was happening where I lived in Research Triangle Park. They had a massive EPA facility that was there. And they were caught. We had a guy who was a researcher with our group noticed that they had some people that had to go to the hospital on something that they were testing. So he started looking at that. What he found was that they began doing some tests about what they call fine particulate matter. And that is like smoke particles or things that you'd have in diesel fuel, for example. And at the time, the EPA even had a page on its website. They took it down after I reported about it. And they got really upset about it. I had a friend at church who worked at that facility, the EPA, and they were livid about that. And after he told me that, I mentioned that on air and got him in trouble. I didn't mean to do that, but that's what happens. They figured out who it was. But they had a website up, said the Smoky Mountains are called the Smoky Mountains because of fine particulate matter. We got to stop all of these cars and everything. It's like, well, they were called the Smoky Mountains long before there were any cars. It doesn't have anything to do with fine particulate matter. We're going to take a real quick break at the bottom of the hour. When we come back, we're going to talk about what's going on with the economy and with the war. Stay with us. We will be right back.
In a world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. You're listening to The David Knight Show.
Yeah, welcome back. And at the very center of all this is a company that I've been reporting on for over a decade, Palantir. Palantir are the people who consciously used as their symbol and their name a crystal ball surveillance system that can not only watch everything that you're doing, but see inside of you, from J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. They have now been proudly part of suppressing European nationalism. This is an article from the New American. Recently, Palantir CEO Alex Karp, who is always at all the big globalist confabs, he's at all the Bilderberg meetings and things like that, Davos, he boasted of his company's role in undermining the plight of law-abiding citizens to secure the blessings of freedom and self-determination in their countries. Karp said, "I think it's fair to say that we have crushed the rise of the right wing in Europe with our software." So what is he talking about here? He says, and it's in an indirect way. He says, well, they got a legitimate gripe about the terrorism and the violence that's being imported here. And so if we can stop that, we will take away the annoyance that has them pushing for nationalism, because his goal is globalism. Far from isolated corporate overreach, says the New American, this reflects a continuum of post-World War II strategies designed to maintain power in the hands of internationalist elites by keeping European populations divided, demoralized, and allergic to a strong national identity. As I point out, this began right away. In 1945, the U.S. wanted to shut down any nationalism. You see, no nationalism is allowed, except for Zionism. Isn't that interesting? Don't you dare speak against the nationalism of Zionism. Oh, they have a right to exist, and they have a right to be a super racist ethnic state. But don't you even talk about how you'd like to preserve your culture. No. The Zionists tell us, because they're the ones who are running the globalism, the Zionists tell us that is not allowed. You're not allowed to criticize them, and you're not allowed to support your own civilization, your own ethnic group in any way, shape, or form. But they can have a radical, apartheid, racist ethnic state, and that is allowed. That's the exception. And the interesting thing is, I think that this one group, which is allowed to have their nationalism, is actually the same group that is pushing globalism. It is actually being pushed by the Zionist. And Karp is very proud of that. He's very proud of what he's done for Zionism, and he's very proud of what he's done to shut down nationalism in any other state. He boasts about that. And he talks about how he has used his Palantir software that tracks and looks at people. He has been able to use that to shut down any opposition to Israel's genocide. Today, the methods have evolved, but the objective remains: suppress organic nationalism because it is antithetical to supranational governance and global capital flows, writes the New American. Tech firms like Palantir with deep ties to intelligence communities represent the new frontier. Using AI-driven data analytics, predictive policing, that was the original AI, by the way, they called it anticipatory intelligence, and neutralization of extremist trends. Nationalist parties across Europe, initially surging on immigration, sovereignty, and economic discontent, have faced coordinated pressure. What do? Well, they use deplatforming, financial restrictions, lawfare, ideological capture. And haven't we seen these same people who are boasting in their meetings that they have? The Jewish leaders are boasting about doing this against people who are protesting their country. And so it's always the same people and the same tactics. Deplatforming, financial restrictions, lawfare, ideological capture. Yeah, we banned Pat Buchanan. We can do that to anybody, says Mark Levin. And we destroyed this person who pushed back against what we're doing in Palestine. She can't even cross the border anymore to come to the U.S. We got her husband fired. We got her debanked, and on and on and on. These are the tactics that they use. By keeping populations weak, turning citizens into consumers, and cultivating a lack of patriotism, elites preserve a manageable order. And folks, this is full spectrum as well. They didn't even mention the fact that they do it through the media and especially through entertainment, to deconstruct and to criticize a country. Well, what does it look like in UK? That's where they've been, I think, perhaps the most successful. Britain has an elite speech monitoring squad. They flagged 106 posts, and about half of those people were arrested because they didn't like what people said online. They called it elite. The elite squad of detectives drawn from forces across England and Wales, spying on people's social media posts.
We've got a crack team of nannies on it. They're watching everything you post now, Governor.
That's right. They call themselves the National Internet Intelligence Investigation Team. That'd be the NIII. I guess that'd be like Monty Python's The Knights Who Say, "Nee." So they're saying, "Nee," whenever they see something on a social media post and they crack down on people. In 2024, what set this off as an excuse was the fact you had several girls murdered by a guy at a Taylor Swift dance class. The online lie about this was that he was an asylum seeker. He wasn't, but they were not off by much. He was the son of some Rwandan asylum seekers. So he's only slightly removed from that. But because people reacted very angrily, of course, and riots came, and they said, well, we don't want these people from other countries in here. Well, he's not from another country. His parents, he's British. His parents are Rwandan. Well, because of that, they used that to set up the Knights Who Say, "Nee," National Intelligence Gathering thing or whatever. So in June, something else happened. And that was the case that we've talked about here and shown pictures of it. The guy, Henry Nowick, who was 18, who was stabbed by an Indian immigrant, Vikram Digwa, who told the arriving officers that Nowick had racially abused him, insulted him. And so that prejudiced the officers so much that they didn't care about the fact that this guy's telling them, "I'm bleeding. I'm having trouble breathing." They wouldn't call an ambulance. They let him die, the police officers did. And they didn't even take the knife away from the guy who stabbed him.
Probably because he's a Sikh and, it's important to his family. Actually, what happened was originally he had his mom take the knife back to his house and hide it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it didn't work because he was convicted and jailed for life the beginning of June. And that was in the first time that the footage went out. And so there was a big pushback against that as well. So therefore, you've got the 106 people who, how dare them speak out against the crimes of the government, which it really was a crime. I mean, the police were absolutely culpable in that murder. It's not just this guy who did it. They let him literally bleed to death, keeping him handcuffed on the ground and not allowing him to have any help. So the referrals spiked in that month, and that really got him off the ground. 106 people complained about that they took exception to, and they put half of them in jail. Asked which posts, however, the police will not tell you. They declined to say. They said, we have an exemption that covers the prevention of crime and the prosecution of offenders. So if you are flagged on all this stuff, you don't know. And you don't know unless they come up and drag you off to jail. This is the kind of star chamber stuff that we have this in the U.S. as well. It's called the no-fly list. You don't know that you're on it. And and many other lists that they've got, you won't know that you're on it until they actually come down on you. That was one of the things I covered. One of the first things I covered when I got to InfoWars was a guy who contacted us and said, his wife was in the military. He was somebody who had been vetted for guns, and he had also been vetted by the TSA to work at airports. And he took a military plane from California. His wife was stationed in Japan. He was going to see her. Took a military plane from California to Hawaii and changed planes there. The plane's about to take off, and these guys come on board and drag him off. Say, you're on the no-fly list. And it's like, well, now what do I do? I mean, I'm stuck in Hawaii. I can't fly. What do I do? Take a slow freighter off of here? How do I do that? And I can't go see my wife. And they would not tell him why he was on the no-fly list. He could not get any information at all from them. Now, eventually, because we got some exposure for that story, he was eventually able to get some people in the military to start pushing on this, and they got some strings pulled, and they got him allowed to fly back to the U.S., but he still was not allowed to know why he was put on the no-fly list, or if he was still on it, or if they took him off. Never could find out any information about that. And so we have that same type of thing here developing in the United States as well. Police acknowledge that this new initiative remains, quote, still in the early stages of being established. So they're going to do a lot more of this. The Times of London estimated the police made 33 arrests per day in 2023 over allegedly offensive online statements, totaling over 12,000 arrests for the year because of what people said on social media.
You've been posting the mean words online now, Governor. You can't do that.
They want to do this to everybody. This is the global plan. And again, the guy that is now the Prime Minister of the UK after they kicked out Keir Starmer is now, he was the guy who was the ID minister about 10 or 15 years ago. So you know he's going to push for a national mark of the beast. The online monitoring effort follows a path set during the pandemic, of course, when the British government deployed the Army's 77 Brigade, a specialist, quote, information warfare unit, that's what they call themselves, to track and to influence public opinion, including monitoring journalists and politicians, anyone who is critical of the lockdown policy. The same lockdown policy, by the way, that Donald Trump had. Isn't that interesting? How do they all get the same policy? That's because they all got the same boss that's running them. And just one more news article here before we move on to economic issues. Looks like Bill Gates' daughter started a business, and she's looking at some really serious jail time. What she did in this business carries a maximum penalty of up to 20 years in prison, plus fines and restitution. Don't worry, Daddy will get you out. She's 23 years old, and she decided that she would set up a business that would help people to shop. And they would help you to shop, and they would, by way of the cookies on your website, they would be able to monetize that if they directed somebody to a particular product with e-commerce. And of course, what else would the daughter of Bill Gates think about? Shopping, of course. Daddy, I want to start a business. What do you like to do? Well, I like to shop. Okay, well, you could help other people shop and make money from that. And so she got into this business, and this was all busted by some reporting from Bloomberg's. Kind of interesting.
Billionaire fight.
Yeah, so, and there's a history for this in terms of it being a crime. A top eBay affiliate was sued by eBay in 2008 for defrauding it and its affiliates. They call this a cookie stuffing scheme. Yeah, they're putting chocolate chips in it either. In 2014, that same person, 6 years later, was sentenced to 5 months in federal prison after being found to have defrauded eBay for an alleged $28 million in marketing fees. So her company is called PHIA, P-H-I-A. It is a personal shopping assistant and a browser extension designed to lead users to the best deals for clothes and fashion accessories, which has probably been her life up to this point. But the interesting thing about all this was when it was exposed by Bloomberg, what they were doing was they were their program was going in and changing cookies. They were moving some people who had legitimately directed people there. They were taking cookies away from people, and they were stuffing their own cookies in. It's kind of a double crime there. And so when that was reported by Bloomberg, they came back and said, well, we're going to stop that. We didn't realize that was happening. Mistakes were made. It's just a software glitch or whatever. And Bloomberg kept investigating because they noticed that their revenue fell 88% on a monthly basis. So that's how much of their business was lying about referrals. And so it took a massive hit. So they started doing a more investigation. Yeah. So what?
Like father, like daughter, I guess.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. That's family values right there. Passed down from one generation to the next. So they started looking at their emails, and they found that they had Slack messages between her and the co-founder. And they said, let me give the messages here. Sorry, I got to change the page here. So She said this was sent to Gates's daughter from the co-founder. Said, "Can you confirm Auto Pop for Cookie Drop is live on all sites, all uppercase, all, with a coupon to confirm that we're monetizing on all." And actually, that was Gates writing to her. "Can you confirm that we're doing this?" And the partner said, "Well, whatever we can do to keep those cookies dropping will be amazing. Thank you," she wrote. And then she also said that, "Well, an engineer has warned me that auto-dropping cookies could be, quote, against compliance." And so
they knew. This is something that is very obviously enumerated.
Yeah, they did it deliberately. And as I said, their revenue fell about $80,000 down to around $10,000. So, they dropped down to only about 12% of their former revenue. So pretty amazing. Most of the revenue was cookie stuffing. I think she should have opened a bakery instead.
Everyone likes those kinds of cookies.
That's right. But she didn't do that.
What's funny is this, there's a scandal that's similar to this that has just happened to a, conservative quote unquote grifter called The Quartering. He just got caught doing this exact same thing, cookie stuffing using his website. So this is something that you should be aware of.
The government
it's illegal, but it's probably a more common practice than people would realize.
Because this is the digital world and they haven't set up a legal framework for this kind of stuff. They got to get creative. So what they're doing is looking at this as wire fraud. That is the actual crime that they're prosecuting people under. Let me get to some of these comments that have been up here. And this was something from yesterday that I didn't get to. I've been bad about reading the comments. Nice of Storm, thank you so much for gifting 5 subs on Rumble yesterday. And today, Radisbro, thank you for the tip. He said, "Dying for your country is a patriotic fairy tale. In reality, you will bleed out in the mud like a butchered dog for absolutely nothing." And that wasn't Radisbro. That was Ernest Hemingway who said that. He's absolutely right. Of course, also Ernest Hemingway. How does somebody so rich or a country so rich go broke? He says, well, gradually, then suddenly. Guard Goldsmith, Liberty Conspiracy. Good to see you, Guard. He said, this trend toward greater aggression is inevitable in a centralized system. The centralized system is funded through the currency so that it can pay off the sub-portions of the collective to abide by it all. That's absolutely right. And we make everything political. That is the thing that drives all this insanity, the centralization, all the rest of it. Pezzo Avante, 1776, he said, we all are enemy combatants now. That is how this criminal rogue government views us. You're absolutely right. IRS Machine Gun, thank you for the tip. He said, I just want to say thank you, David, and the Knight family for the great show. Well, thank you. I really do appreciate that.
Yes, thank you very much.
And we appreciate your support. That is what keeps the program going. We're funded by volunteer support. Thank you. Chambers Nancy says, 2 police car lights flashing, guns drawn, Kevlar vests on, and banged my door. When I opened the door, they said, oops, wrong house. Have a nice day. She said, scary. And this is why we've seen this happen so many times, these no-knock police raids. Right? They get the wrong house. And I've talked about this over and over again. When Terry Gilliam from Monty Python did the movie Brazil in 1984, I remember seeing that, and they had a no-knock police raid like that. That was the type of thing that has now become standard. And when I first saw it, I just thought, it's so over the top. It's just, and it really was for those days. But now that has become standard practice. So it's great. I'm glad that they didn't do it to you. We've had situations where the no-knock raid and they've got the wrong house. They've thrown stun grenades into a baby's crib and many other heinous crimes like that. It is truly horrific, the things that can be done. We're going to take a very quick break, folks, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to The David Knight Show.
Well, we have Senator Kennedy glumly telling Sean Hannity the chances of passing the SAVE Act have, quote, gone down immeasurably. And so in response to that, we've had Wayne Allenroot. Again, this is a guy who's an influencer like Laura Loomer, using their influence for the maximum evil that they can get out of it. We've had Wayne Allenroot in the past telling Trump, hey, just call ICE nice. And that'll fix everything, right? Yeah, don't pay attention to the electric gloves, the beatings, the shootings, or the the rest, the false arrests. Just call them nice, and everybody will forget all about it. Well, he's got another suggestion for Trump when he interviewed Trump this last week. He said, what you need to do is issue an executive order to do whatever you want. This isn't going to pass through the Senate in time, so just whatever you want, just do it with an executive order.
So let me put an idea in your head, okay? Because it's so hard to get the Senate to do anything. Now they're on recess. They don't get anything done if they never get the Save America Act done. You have the right to declare a national security emergency for elections. And the Supreme Court ruled in 1983 under Reagan that INS versus Chadha, that if you declare a national security emergency as the President of the United States, they can't challenge it. It can only be overturned by a 2/3 vote of both houses of Congress. So if you do this in the next month, we will get photo ID, proof of citizenship, and a limit to mail-in ballots. And
Let
you
me
don't
just
even
say that
need
stranger
the
things
Senate
have
vote.
happened. Okay, I'll leave it at that.
All right,
Yeah,
we'll leave it
stranger
at that.
things. Stranger things have happened. Yeah, in this administration, stranger things have happened. Look at a war. You start the war and they can't shut it down. And this has been the tactic of the Trump regime from the very beginning. Always removing the guardrails, always testing, pushing. This is why I call him Precedent Trump, because he is always setting precedents to further centralize power and to remove all the legal and constitutional guardrails that have been put there for a really good reason. You start moving fences, you might want to ask why they're there in the first place. But not this guy. Yeah, just use your raw power. And when you look at the SAVE Act, well, there's a lot of things that are in it. I mean, I certainly don't disagree with the fact that you ought to have an ID to vote. Absolutely agree with that. And I've said that for years. I even talked about how in North Carolina, a friend of Karen's twin brother voted in the 2012 election. I couldn't get him to come on and talk about it. But he told Keith, he said, I went to vote, and I know what it was like going to vote in North Carolina. They had the longest voting period of anybody, and they had no voter ID. And so he goes there to vote, and he gives them his name and address. All you have to do is look up somebody's name and address. You can go vote. And the person looks it up and said, yeah, you've already voted. And so is this other person at your address. He goes, that's my mother. She's been dead for years. Well, that's the way it works, right? And we kept hearing that, oh, that's not happening. It's like, well, I know somebody that's happened to, as a matter of fact. And it is obviously open for fraud. So I don't have a problem with voter ID. What I have a problem with is the kind of stuff that we're talking to Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai about the other day. And that is the extra restrictions on ballot access that apply to independent and third-party candidates that never apply to Democrats or to Republicans. The access to debates, which usually you can't get. The gerrymandering that happens with all this stuff. And finally, when you look at it, the dishonest way that they count the ballots and the fact that they don't keep ballot images, which they're supposed to. I mean, that was happening in Texas when we were there. And as Shiva talked about it, that happened in Massachusetts as well. And for a federal race, that is a violation of federal law. They did not retain the ballot image when you vote for this and it's tallied electronically. And so we have so many problems with voter ID. And of course, another aspect of this is not only having voter ID, but the SAVE Act would start the vote by mail. Who was it that did vote by mail? That was Trump as part of his phony pandemic. And I said that when it happened in 2020. And so now he has set that precedent, and he doesn't like that precedent. And so the solution to that is just to violate all law, according to Wayne Allenroot. What an amazing guy he is, truly. Before we take a break, real quickly, I want to talk a little bit about what's going on with the Great Replacement. This is a clip from a guy who is a Christian who got out of Iran, and he is speaking at a public meeting about a proposed Islamic center in McKinney, Texas. Here's that clip right here.
Hello, my name is Eddie Issa. I'm a Sharia law survivor from Iran. And I'm here to tell you this is a dangerous ideology you're allowing in your country. Every country that is Islamic now, it used to be a Christian country. And we were soft Christians, and we allowed these people to come in, bring their Sharia law into their countries, and slowly kill us off left and right. Let me make it very clear to you. Christianity is a personal relationship with God, where it says, render unto Caesar's what is Caesar's, render unto God what is God's. Islam is Sharia law, deen wa dawah, religion and state, which is not even compatible with the American thing. And when these people will use taqiyya to lie to you, to manipulate you, because whenever Islam is little, they will lie to you and tell you they come in peace. This is level 1. Level 2 is what's happening in UK right now, where you have two-tier policing, where you have like the blasphemy laws, Islamophobia, racism, all this nonsense that they talk about. First of all, Islam is not a race. So anytime you criticize Islam, they will use the race card. But every country has this disgusting ideology inside their country, including my own country, Iran, Russia. Islamophobia is another made-up bullshit because they don't want you to criticize their death cult. That's why they will put that. That's why they push it in UK. In every country they go to, M103 is in Canada right now. They deliberately try to silence us. And the worst people that are trapped in it is Muslims themselves, because they can't leave that death cult. Because they're told, if you question that disgusting book, you're called a kufar. And they get killed over it, just like my friends who are apostates in prison or dead right now in Iran. I'm telling you, this is a bad idea, and you're going to regret not listening to people like us who lived under Sharia law.
Thank you, Eddie.
Oh, well, it's a system, isn't it? You have at the bottom level, they're bringing massive numbers, massive waves of Muslims who are going to set up Sharia law. At the top, we've got the Noahide laws coming from the Jews, and many of the things he said was they use this thing, Islamophobia, that's racism. Or if you say that you are anti-Zionist, again, Zionism is not a race. It's not even a Jewish necessarily thing. We got a lot of Jews who are anti-Zionist. And they are beaten in Israel, and they are censored in America for being anti-Zionist. So many of the tactics are exactly the same. So we have the Zionists at the top. We have the massive waves of Muslims from immigrant Muslims at the bottom. And it is a pincer movement. And we're going to talk more about this when we come back. But we're going to take a real quick break. We'll be right back.
using free speech to free minds. It's the David Knight Show.
And again, that guy who was speaking out against the Sharia Law Center going in Texas, their community, he's absolutely 100% right. Yeah, if you don't follow they combine religion and government, and they use religion as a way to extend their government. So if you're not Muslim, they call you kafir. In the same way, if you're not Zionist, they call you goy, right? And they don't have Sharia law, but they have Noahide law. And I've played for you the clips, and there's more than one clip of this. This is someone who is in Israel, and he's taking pictures, and they're spitting on Christians. And the guy said, I have, my religion says I should kill you. I should kill you. Why? Because the first law of Noahide is idolatry, and they consider all Christians to be idolaters because we worship the Lord Jesus Christ. And so he said, I should kill you. And he says, well, why aren't you doing that? I said, well, I will when we get the Sanhedrin. You see, when they get a critical mass, they will do the same thing that the Muslims do. We have an American way, and that's what we need to stand for. The American way is based on Christian principles. We don't have to have a Christian government. We don't need to have everybody doing communion in the same way or worshiping God in the same way, but we do have the values that come from Christianity. Those are the values of the Declaration of Independence. The fact that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with inalienable rights, that is the basis of our civilization. That is not what the Muslim and the Zionist civilizations seek to do. And that is the real issue. But it is either from the top with the Zionist and the globalists, or it is from the bottom with the massive hordes of Muslims that they have brought in, quite frankly. And so we've got now in the Democrat Party, Hassan Piker has now become the face of hate and intolerance. And we look at the kind of things that he is saying. Why is he not arrested for hate speech? And I'm not calling for that to happen. I just say the double standard. If he was Jewish, right, if he was somebody who was opposing what the Jews want, they would have him arrested. They're not, surprisingly, having him arrested so much. He's focused right now not so much on Zionism as he is on white people. And so Hassan Piker has become essentially an official spokesperson for the Democrat Socialists of America, the Marxist hardcore of the Democrat Party, because the Democrat Party is socialist and Marxist in its leanings. These are just, however, the unapologetic, hardcore, doctrinaire purists that are there. And so increasingly what we're seeing is this interesting merger of the hardcore socialist communist with the Islamic people who are here. And I think it is kind of interesting because when we look at this, and we look at the tactics that have been built by the Zionists throughout the institutions, and again, it is a Marxist idea put out by Antonio Gramsci that the Marxists would, as he put it, march through the institutions, take them over from the top. So we don't have to have a revolution in the streets or fighting people in the streets. We can do it from the top. And that really is the path that the Marxist Zionists have taken, the Bolsheviks, if you will. They've taken over the institutions from the top. They've been very successful at that as well. And so the Muslims are there to do the other tactic that communists have frequently done. That is to create riots and take over things from the bottom. And so both of these pincers are really trying to take over America, if you look at it. And by the way, when you look at what Netanyahu did, Satanyahu helped Hamas get into power in Gaza. They gave them money. They pushed for them to get there. Why? Because he wanted an enemy that was going to ramp up people, that would motivate people. He wanted a MacGuffin, if you will. Not to say that Hamas is good, and not to say that Al-Qaeda is good, or ISIS, or Al-Nusra, or the Mujahideen, or whatever, but we had our government created and funded those as well. And so Netanyahu did the same thing with Hamas. And when I look at this, I just got to say I'm somewhat suspicious that there isn't a Zionist hand behind some of this. When you look at how hardcore Zionists like Alan Dershowitz have now thrown in completely with Republicans, and he is antithetical to everything that the typical Republican voter, especially the Christians who now are overwhelmingly Zionist, the things that they want. They don't want the LGBT agenda. They don't want CRT racist theory. They don't want DEI. And yet Alan Dershowitz loves all those things. Why is he throwing in with Republicans over one issue, over Zionism? And so when you look at what they're doing, they're taking over and have control of the Republicans, as I call them, the ZOP, the Zionist-occupied politicians, the Zionist-owned politicians. And so since they've got control of that party, they don't want to have any opposition. And so it is a perfect thing for them to create and to support, probably secretly, these boogeymen who are going to be pushing communism and getting everybody scared and run everybody to the political party that they own lock, stock, and barrel, the Republicans.
According to John Fetterman himself, his Zionism puts him out of step with the rest of his party, which, I'm sorry, only 13% stand with Israelis against the Palestinians. This is a party whose grassroots is right now captured by the left. And so Zionism does not have a future in the American left. The Democratic Party's relationship with Zionism depends on whether it's willing to repudiate that far left. And the thing that makes this so appalling is that Jews built the left in this country. We built the labor movement. We broke the New Deal. 70% of the lawyers who worked on civil rights cases were Jews. We've been at the forefront of every liberal and leftist issue in this country. The absolute chutzpah of saying, you're not welcome here. You know what it reminds me of? When they banned smoking in bars. I was a smoker, and I was so outraged. I was like, if there's going to be a turf war over this, surely the smokers should have gotten the bars, okay? And you can so easily imagine a counterfactual.
Yeah, the Jews should own the institutions, and they do.
Wait a minute. We can't oppose Zionism because we would lose our beloved Jews who have been there with us at the forefront every minute that we built this movement. We have to find a way to make sure that Zionists still feel welcome. We could never do that to them. And they didn't do that. They did the opposite.
That's right. They have created and pushed CRT, DEI, the transgender nonsense, the entire LGBT thing. That's all been pushed by the Jews in terms of the left. They created all of that stuff. They created it as opposition. And so now we've got a guy who is absolutely repulsive. Hassan Piker has called for his followers to kill capitalists. He said, yeah, kill them. Kill those MFers and murder those MFers in the streets. Let the streets soak in their effing red capitalist blood. See, he's from the old school capitalists. And by the way, when we talk about the Antonio Gramsci school, Pete Buttigieg's father spent his entire career at Notre Dame studying Antonio Gramsci. He loves the tactics of Antonio Gramsci. When his son, Pete Buttigieg, went to college, he sent him to Harvard to study under Sokvan Berkovich. Berkovich is a guy who blames everything that's wrong in America and the world on American Christians. He's somebody who loved the Italian communist movement so much that he changed his first name to Sokvan, which is a contraction of Sacco and Vanzetti. The heroes to the communist movement, to the Italian communists and anarchists at the time, claiming that they were framed. I won't get into that, but the bottom line is that those are his heroes. And that's who Pete Buttigieg studied under. That's where the left is. They're hardcore Marxists. I've also called him Pete Booty Marx or whatever. But yeah, he holds his LGBT credentials out there as well as he hides his Marxist credentials. So he's upfront about his LGBT identity, but he hides his Marxist identity from you. But this guy doesn't. This guy is not from the Antonio Gramsci, hey, we'll secretly take over all the institutions at the top. No, this guy is a Bolshevik in the traditional sense. We'll go out and just kill people in the streets. And understand that nearly the entire Bolshevik movement in Russia was Jewish. These people have been hardcore communist from the beginning. And when you look at the kibbutz in Israel, it is a socialist model there as well.
There's speculation that the murder of the last czar actually took the form of some kind of Kabbalist ritualistic murder.
Who knows? Yeah. Well, Hassan Piker says, we want more immigrants to come into your countries. And then we're going to F your sisters and then your daughters. And we're here to destroy the white race. Yeah. Well, that's not, we don't see the Jewish censors out there having a problem with that. Imagine if somebody said the equivalent, and people have said the equivalent, about the Jewish, not even the Jewish people, but about the Zionists themselves because of a political state. And we know what happens when they say that type of thing about Zionism. He says, overall, my favorite flag is Hezbollah. And he said, Hassan Piker, sitting at the table with an LGBTQ plus flag, says, but my favorite flag is Hezbollah. Do you see a similarity there? This guy is the American version of Hamas. And I mean that from the sense of Netanyahu setting this up. To me, I look at this and it just stinks of a CIA Zionist setup when you look at these Democrat socialists that are out there. He says, America deserved 9/11. I do not support the United States of America. And he has been campaigning with the guy who won the nomination for, I forget what he's running for now. Was it governor? Abdul El Sayed. Anyway, he was very vocal about his position. He's either running for
He also
governor or
supported
senator.
the new communist socialist mayor of New York as well.
Yeah, Mamdani. Yeah. And I think he was also behind Hong, who just who just lost in the elections that they had this week. Anyway, his close proximity to the DSA-aligned candidates, combined with his anti-American rhetoric, his revolutionary Marxism that is hostile to America's political and capitalist system, has federal investigators examining the possibilities that revolutionary activity is being helped by foreign subversion networks. Well, why don't you start with Israel? Because that's who I would suspect in the first place. Because we've seen this game played out over and over again with Israel, with the CIA. He said, I'm happy, this is a Republican now, saying, I'm happy the University of Washington, for literally the first time ever, has made the correct decision to not have an America-hating communist spread his hatred and his terrible ideology to young people at our taxpayer-funded universities. Obviously, universities are a place for the First Amendment and free speech, but, and I'm not even going to read the rest of his statement there. Folks, there is no but in the First Amendment. So but out of free speech. And I mean that. I absolutely despise everything this hateful guy says. I despise what he has to say. But if we don't support free speech for the worst of us, then none of us will have it. And that is true of every aspect of the Bill of Rights. We can always find somebody who has abused this, but we don't want to throw it out. We understand the importance of having that there because the worst terrorism, the worst hatred is the terrorism and hatred that comes from a totalitarian government. And we are well down that path. We do not want to be cheering the censorship of anybody. And again, I am disgusted with everything this guy has to say. I would not defend a bit of it. But we don't want to lose the First Amendment with that as well. I have a comment here that I want to get to before we run out of time. Mama C, 1996. Asking prayer for my dad. He's in the hospital with kidneys not functioning properly. 85 years old, devoted follower of Christ. Well, again, everybody, please pray for him and for the family especially. He's had a long life, but that doesn't mean that we want it to end. And so we just ask that everybody pray because we know that God listens to prayers. And for whatever reason, it is very effective when a lot of people are praying for someone like Mama C's father. So yes, please pray that he would recover and pray for the family and pray for that they would have a peace with whatever happens, especially since he is a follower of Christ. It's just a transition to actually a better life, quite frankly, when we look at it. Although none of us wants to die, we need to take comfort in what lays ahead for those as Christ says, so those who believe in me have eternal life. It's not a possibility, it's a promise. Well, the ethnicity that is most likely to be on welfare in each country, guess what? In the USA, it's Somalian. In Denmark, it is Somalian. In the Netherlands, it is Somalian. In Norway, it is Somalian. Let me let you guess what it is in Finland. Yes, that's right, Somalian. In Sweden, Somalian. They are most likely to be on welfare and responsible for the highest crime rates per capita in each of the countries. Now, there was an interesting article where they talked about the Mall of America in 1992, and they had a video about it showing the opening of this massive mall. I guess malls are getting to be kind of a thing of the past as we lose our bricks and mortar stores and we lose our desire to be out in public and physical areas here. But here's what it looked like in 1992, the opening of the Mall of America.
The bargains are coming! The bargains are coming! Hear ye, hear ye! The mother of all shopping crowds was waiting as the doors opened.
Yes, shop till you drop. We are professional shoppers.
By noon, the 2 parking ramps were filled with 13,000 cars, and that sent the mall's war room into action.
We were able to divert to off-site parking properly and efficiently and effectively within 5 minutes.
There was congestion on the roads, but the plan seemed to work. Meanwhile, the traffic jam continued inside the mall. It took almost an hour to get on some of the most popular amusement rides, and the wait continued in the food line.
Well, I placed an order at about 1:27 and got the food about 2:20.
Mall officials say the delays were due in part to a green workforce.
You sure got a variety. You can buy anything you want.
Yeah, again, amazing to see the crowds, and I've never been there, but the Mall of America's got roller coasters, as you saw, log flume ride, all the rest of that stuff. What is it like today? Well, you know, that area has had been inflicted with the biggest number of Somalis coming in, so I guess this is now the Somali of America. This is what it looks like today.
There's so many Somalians in this. Oh God! Any place you walk, you see all of that.
Yeah, that's right. That's what they brought to our country. They brought massive welfare fraud. They've even brought Ilhan Omar along with them to this country and put her in Congress. Crime in Minneapolis is soaring. Somali-tied fraud is off the charts. Most of the people are on some kind of a welfare. As a matter of fact, 54% are on welfare. They're paid for by the people who used to be able to go to the mall and shop for bargains. Now things have gotten more expensive because of all that, right? And you know, when you look at the Trump administration, as I pointed out before, all of this stuff about Somali fraud actually broke in his first administration. Of course, I didn't expect Biden to do anything about it. But all that stuff really broke in his first administration. I pointed that out. I covered it myself. They didn't do anything about it until you had Nick Shirley do that viral video. And with all of the abuse that is happening with ICE and the electric gloves that they're giving them and the shootings and all the rest of this stuff, the Trump administration wouldn't do the obvious thing and shut down that fraud. As a matter of fact, when you look at the amount of money that they're giving to the refugee program, which is how these people came in, with the refugee program, the Trump administration doubled that. At the same time, they tell you that they are protecting the borders and protecting you from immigrants. At the same time, they're doubling that in terms of the Somali fraud. Again, the highest rates of crime per capita. 54% of Somalis in Minnesota are on food stamps. They're draining American taxpayers dry, and that's not even counting the fraud schemes that are there.
I mean, when you look at Somalia and what it's produced, they aren't really capable of integrating with a modernized society. They simply don't have the skill set. Mm-hmm. They're only capable of running scams, really, and defrauding the American people. You're not going to hire Somalians to build the next supercomputer. That's simply the facts of it.
It's a violent, corrupt country and has been for a very long time. Well, let's talk a little bit about economics and the effects of Trump's war of choice. Gas prices have never been this high. In mid-August, the national average for regular gas stood at $4.03 per gallon. Gas Buddy's head of petroleum research said the national average has never been above $4 a gallon after August the 12th in any previous year. ever. Gasoline prices were in their second stretch above $4 per gallon this year, after dipping periodically following that level in June and July. Why did it dip? Well, it was dipping on fake news from Donald Trump about what was happening with the shortage that he had created. Again, Trump did all of this. So far this year, the national average for regular unleaded gasoline has spent 103 days, or 46% of its time, at or above $4 per gallon. The highest count of $4 plus gas since 2022, following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The gasoline index was up 24.6. Let's just call it 25%. Gasoline price index was up 25% from a year earlier. And diesel is even worse. There is global desperation around diesel. Diesel prices rippling through the economy here and abroad, affecting shipping costs, construction, and everything else in between. And when we start going up on the cost of diesel, that's like adding a value-added tax. Value-added tax is something that is taxed at each stage of production, at each stage where it changes hands. And that's really what is happening with diesel. We have this just-in-time delivery system that we've set up. And it is a way to make things more efficient. Nevertheless, each of these, because of just-in-time, product is constantly, it's got a lot of moving parts, a lot of connection parts, and those connection parts are run with diesel fuel. The average price of U.S. Diesel is up 44 cents over just the last month to $5.32 per gallon compared to $3.71 a year ago. $5.32 today, according to the AAA. In the Middle East, refineries are processing much less capacity, as capacity remains physically impaired, logistically stranded. That's the embargoes and blockades. The physically impaired is the bombings that have been done, both by the U.S., Israel, and Iran in retaliation. Operationally unable to restart with any confidence. Russia's restrictions on diesel exports following Ukrainian drone strikes on Russian refineries have removed another 10% of seaborne supplies from the market, and China's refinery activity remains subdued. Diesel exports from Russia, the Middle East, and Asia were 1.3 million barrels per day lower year over year. About 20% of global seaborne trade has disappeared. Diesel is the tightest market right now of all the different fuels. And the U.S. fuel accounts for roughly 20 to 25% of trucking companies' operational costs, according to the American Trucking Association, a major trade group. It's going to cause the cost of everything to go up. Like I said, it's like a value-added tax. Each stage of production, each handoff. U.S. refineries are running at 96% of capacity. So there's not going to be any help coming from increased capacity in the U.S. Meanwhile, the world's largest alumina refinery outside of China has abruptly cut in half their output. Why? Because they can't get natural gas. Why is that? Well, because Trump did this. The global effects of this guy. He is setting in place, folks, all the dominoes for a global depression as well as a global world war. That's why I said he is a one-man fourth turning. The last fourth turning we had was the Great Depression and World War II. And now we've got Trump. Norwegian aluminum producer Alunorte plant in Brazil, one of the world's largest alumina refineries, reduced output by 50% following disruptions to natural gas availability. The disruptions forced a 50% reduction in output, sent aluminum prices to a 7-week high. They rose nearly 2% in London, 1% in Shanghai, and it is all because they can't get the fuel. The disruption means that Alunorte cannot maintain enough steam and furnace heat to operate the production lines, forcing the refinery to reduce throughput. It is the world's largest single-site alumina refinery and the largest one outside of China. So as Americans are seeing high prices persisting, of course, people are having to cut back on spending. And what do you get from the Republican Party? Well, you get mockery from Ben Shapiro, mockery from Dan Crenshaw. They want war. They don't care what it costs you in terms of blood or treasure or food prices. They don't care about any of that. They want their war. And so when you look at what is happening with it, it's the same thing that we saw Trump do in 2020. It was absolutely unnecessary to do lockdown. It was his choice to do that. It was a war that he conducted against the American people. He's doing the same thing exactly again. And so where is gold? Well, the LBMA snapshot survey predicts a gold price average near $4,500 an ounce by year end, they said. But of course, that was several days ago. They were saying, yeah, we might eventually get up to 4,500. We nearly got there yesterday. Why? Because of the CPI, the Consumer Price Index data that was released yesterday. And just understand, when we look at these reports that are coming out in terms of employment, in terms of inflation from the CPI, look at how they manipulate these things, number one. And then look at how they constantly lie to us. I mean, we know that the labor statistics, on a regular basis, the Labor Department will always adjust the numbers in a downward in the next quarter. So when we get a quarter away or a month away, whenever they release their next report, they will lower the ones that they just gave us today to make those reports look better. That has been a standard tactic. And when we look at the way that they measure inflation, remember that Kevin Warsh, as he came in, he changed it yet again. I forget how many times they have changed it in the last 20 years or so. I think it was something around 8 times. And he's just changed it again. They're constantly lying to us about this, but you know what the price is when you look at the pump, when you look at the grocery store. And so the question was, could gold break $4,500 on CPI day when they released those numbers? And it nearly did. It got up to $4,438 an ounce, considering that just last week it was down at $4,000. Now, some of the stuff that has happened on the way down and these other things has been influenced by, there was some movement because of selling by some of the countries that had gold set aside for a rainy day, and it started raining really hard. It's like a monsoon. So they started selling this stuff. But the fundamentals were still baked in, and that's why it didn't fall back down anywhere close to where it was a year or two ago. And now things are starting to turn in the other direction, actually. So part of this, when you look at the CPI thing, understand that the numbers were not as bad as you might expect, not only because they are manipulating them, but also because they're looking at old data. Energy prices fell in July. Why? Well, because we had lies from Trump about how they had won the war, right? So they went down in June and July. They're going up significantly now. And so we'll see that in the next time that they release these numbers. But that's the reality of where this is. The CPI is historical and it is old. And so one investor is saying, well, I see that CPI has cleared the path to $4,600 for gold. Nevertheless, the bottom line is, don't think of it simply as a safety hedge. Think of it as wealth protection. And think about the fact that you can gradually accumulate it. You can do the dollar cost averaging that gets rid of some of the noise. If you go to davidknight.gold, that'll take you to Tony Arterman at Wise Wolf. And he has an excellent way to do that. He calls it Wolfpack. You can sign up for a certain amount each month. They'll take care of that savings program for you. Thank you for joining us. Have a good day. The common man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. TheDavidKnightShow.com.